The morning was quiet along the banks of the Missouri River in 1817, but the silence would not last. Somewhere beyond the trees, hundreds of Cherokee warriors moved with deliberate purpose, their steps soft, but their weapons ready. They had come west, far from their homes in the southeast, driven by hunger, pressure from white settlers, and the endless fight to claim new ground. Ahead of them lay a village of the Osage people, a nation older to the land, their lodges standing along the riverbank. Within hours, what had begun as a migration would become remembered as the Great Osage Massacre, a brutal slaughter that left bodies strewn across the earth and turned a tribal feud into one of the bloodiest confrontations on the frontier. The Osage had long dominated the Missouri region. Skilled hunters and fierce fighters, they ranged across the plains and woodlands from the Mississippi to the Great Plains, claiming vast hunting grounds. They had established trade with French colonists a century earlier, controlling furs and alliances with a confidence that made them powerful and feared. The Osage were known for their height, their discipline in battle, and their ability to maintain control of their territory. But as American expansion pressed westward, their dominance began to waver. Rivals saw opportunities. Among them were the Cherokee, newly displaced and searching for survival. By the early 1800s, the Cherokee people were facing immense pressure in their ancestral homelands of Georgia, Tennessee, and the Carolinas. Settlers seized their lands, treaties were forced upon them, and hunger gnawed at their communities. Some groups, determined to resist by moving before they were driven, migrated west into present-day Arkansas and Missouri. There, they came into direct conflict with the Osage, who regarded them as intruders trespassing on their ancient hunting grounds. Skirmishes erupted, raids on hunting parties, theft of horses, ambushes along trails. The blood between the two nations deepened with each clash. In 1817, a Cherokee war party decided to strike a decisive blow. Accounts suggest they were not alone. Their ranks may have included warriors from allied tribes, even some Shawnee, Chickasaw, and Choctaw. Together, they formed a war party of several hundred men. They moved under cover, armed with muskets, rifles, tomahawks, and knives. Their target was a large Osage village near the Missouri River. The Osage had warriors of their own, but they were scattered that day, many away on hunts, others trading. The village was vulnerable. The attack began suddenly. At dawn, the war party descended on the Osage village with terrifying speed. Shots rang out, arrows flew, and the air was filled with the cries of panic. Lodges caught fire as Cherokee warriors surged through the settlement. Men who tried to resist were cut down in the open. Women screamed as they tried to flee with their children. Some were struck down before they could reach the trees. Others were dragged back, taken prisoner in the chaos. The Osage fought desperately, but they were overwhelmed. Their enemies had come in overwhelming numbers, and the surprise was complete. Bodies fell across the village grounds. Estimates vary, but historians believe at least 90, perhaps more than 100 Osage men, women, and children were killed that day. Dozens more were taken captive, led away in chains of grief to Cherokee camps. The riverbanks, once alive with the rhythm of daily life, were choked with smoke and silence. The Osage who survived the onslaught could do little but mourn as they regrouped with returning hunters and warriors. For them, it was more than a defeat. It was humiliation, a wound to their pride and power, and a loss that could never be fully avenged. The news of the massacre spread quickly across the frontier. Traders carried word to St. Louis, where fur companies and military officials listened with alarm. The United States government, already nervous about tensions among tribes, saw the slaughter as dangerous. The Osage had been allies of the French and later engaged with American agents. Now, the Cherokee, driven west by American settlement, had attacked them in overwhelming force. It was a vivid demonstration of how one people's displacement created conflict with another. For the Cherokee, The massacre was seen as both vengeance and survival. They had struck hard at an enemy that had harassed their settlements, stolen their game, and tried to block their presence in the West. Captives taken that day were meant to weaken Osage strength and expand Cherokee influence in the region. Yet it also tied the Cherokee to an unending cycle of violence. The Osage never forgave the attack. Raids and retaliations continued for years, leaving a trail of blood along the borderlands of Missouri and Arkansas. For the Osage, the memory of 1817 lingered as a scar. Their elders recounted the slaughter in stories of mourning, teaching their young the price of vigilance and the cruelty of betrayal. They were already facing shrinking lands as treaties with the United States stripped away their territory. Now they had to guard against Cherokee raids as well. The balance of power in the region shifted. Where once the Osage had been uncontested rulers of the land, they now faced rivals emboldened by bloodshed and a government eager to push all native nations aside. The massacre also revealed the tragic consequences of American expansion. White settlers might have seen two savage tribes locked in warfare, but the truth was far more complex. The Cherokee had been driven into Osage lands by the relentless pressure of settlement and treaties. The Osage had fought fiercely to defend their homes. Both peoples were caught in a tightening vice, manipulated and diminished by a young nation hungry for land. The blood spilled on that riverbank was not only a tribal feud, it was also the echo of Washington's policies that pitted native against native while settlers claimed the spoils. By the 1820s, the cycle of displacement only grew worse. The Cherokee themselves would face further removal, culminating in the Trail of Tears 2 decades later. The Osage would lose nearly all their ancestral land, pushed into reservations far from the Missouri homeland. Both nations carried the memory of 1817, but history pushed their tragedy to the margins. The massacre became a footnote, remembered mainly in tribal histories and in the scattered records of traders and officials. Yet for those who picture that morning, the horror is clear. The smoke rising above a burning village. The cries of children silenced. The desperate resistance of warriors cut down before their families. The stillness of the riverbank when it was over, broken only by the sound of fire consuming the lodges. The Great Osage Massacre was not just a battle, it was an extermination, carried out in fury, that reshaped the balance of power in the region and left wounds that would never heal. Thank you for listening to Deserted Trails. Subscribe for more forgotten stories from the old frontier.